presentation. Okay, part two. We want to talk about smart cities. And I'm going to hand this back over to our chief, and he'll give a little introduction, and then we'll go through the smart cities proposal for you.
As I mentioned before, one of the main reasons that we entered this smart cities contest basically is because we want to try to use technology to make our community smarter, as they call it. Lisa and Amy in the school and Joanne and JP had been doing a lot of things that we saw could be enhanced through technology. And also, the money that's involved here can help us to push that ahead a little faster and a little quicker. Joanne will go through the proposal, and I'll help her to fill in some of the information also. Go ahead.
Canada launched a competition-based initiative back in 2017, and Canada's trying to take a look, how does the country solve the country's problems using technology, connected data? So they put this competition out. Duncan came across it. He brought it to us and said, what can we do with this? So this competition was across Canada, open to municipalities, First Nations, different various governments. And so there were three categories, one for 50 million, one for 10 million, and one for 5 million. Because of our population, we fit into the $5 million prize category. So we took a look at what is the vision of our community, what's happening in the community, what are those problems in the community that we could fix using technology, data, and data. So like Duncan said, the school has already had their vision in terms of where they were going as an education institution. We were already working on some stuff in regards to language. So we pulled those two initiatives together, and that's what our Smart Cities competition was. One of the biggest pieces of the Smart Cities competition is that whatever we do in Biigtigong, it needs to be scalable. Other communities have to replicate it, and it has to be open source. And open source basically means that it should be out there, it should be free for everyone. We should be using technology, we should be using tools that Fort Hope could use, that the City of Montreal could use, the City of Vancouver could use. So in order for this project to even be considered in this proposal, that we're not only doing it for our community, but we're supposed to be developing a model that any other nation, any other community, any other group across Canada can use and replicate. So that's really, really important. So we're not just doing this for our community, we're doing this for the world. So that's part of what the Smart Cities is about. So there were more than 200 communities across Canada that applied for this, and 130 applications were submitted. So in June, the finalists were announced, and we were one of the finalists. So there's 5 finalists going after the $5 million prize money. So our proposals are due March 5th. And basically, it's a $5 million prize, but inside of our proposal, we need to identify how will we utilize $5 million to make this come alive. So it's not here, $5 million, do what you want. It's here, you're going to have $5 million to implement this. One of the biggest things that is really different about this, unlike the current contribution agreements we have, this is going to be results-based. So in developing the proposal, it's very much performance measurements. So we need to be very specific and we will not get the money until we've achieved a milestone. So it's not like, here, go and spend it. It's like, okay, lay out your plan, and when you achieve Part A, if Part A cost you $10,000, you'll get $10,000. Do Part B. If Part B costs you $200,000, when it's completed, they'll give it to you. So that's how this works. That's very different than how Canada currently distributes money. So we're working on the proposal. We'll have it in by the end of February, and in the spring, we'll determine if we want or not. So the $5 million isn't here, do what you will. The $5 million will be attached to the implementation of this. So it'll be over 5 years. So we will determine the budget, and if we win, that's how the $5 million will come out through a 5-year plan. Part of the Smart Cities proposal required us to write a challenge statement. So underneath there is our challenge statement. I'm not going to read it because I'll chit-chat about it in the next slide. But one of the things we're taking a look at, that Smart Cities is about our children, about this little girl who was walking up here, about these beautiful young babies in here. It's about their babies. Her babies are babies and babies. So that's what Smart Cities is about. So if we move forward, and as we move forward, to remember it is about our future children, it's about our children, and it's really not about us. We're not making decisions about us. We're making decisions for Gage's babies. Not gonna come for a long time though, eh, Gage? Your mama doesn't want to become a no-commiss yet. So as we move forward, to keep that in mind, that's what this is about. So our vision, and this vision is about the world of technology. Whether we like it or not, the world is changing very fast. And it's not just about the devices we see in front of us. The whole social structure of the world, the whole economic base of the world, the whole environmental piece of the world, everything is changing very quickly and very fast, and very becoming a world that is driven by technology, a world driven by data. And if we do not take action, big action, we will be left behind. So when we talk about better educated, we're going to talk about STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So that's a big piece of our proposal, is to look at STEM. So in order for our kids to be better educated, they need to be educated in STEM. I'm not saying shoot history, shoot language arts, anything like that. We're not saying that. But we need to concentrate on STEM. So better educated means STEM education. More employable, we see stuff now. You know, Duncan's told stories where she's been out traveling and people have technology jobs and have no applicants. Engineering firms, other stuff like that, they don't have any applicants, and they're having to go international to get applications because no one in Canada has the skill set. So looking at being more employable. The issue over identity and pride and knowing who we are as Anishinaabe people is very important. And we have lots of studies. Lisa Amy can speak to all of the work that they've done in the past, looking at the importance of identity, the importance of knowing who you are, where you come from, knowing your ancestors, and all of that stuff is very important to be better grounded and be more holistically Anishinaabe. Because without identity, we could have STEM, we could have all of this other stuff, but if we don't know who we are not going to succeed. And so that is a big piece. How do we instill that sense of who our children are inside of them to help them? So that's what our vision is, and that's part of what we're hoping the Smart Cities proposal will do. Our Smart Cities proposal, like Duncan said, there's 3 main components. The first piece is Anishinaabe win immersion, okay? So I will speak to that after. The second piece is K-12 STEM curriculum. Okay, again, we know what STEM is. And the third piece is the Meetup app. the Meetup app is going to be just an app that will allow this young fella, perhaps, he wants to come home for the weekend. He's on the app. He sees donkeys going out to Dead Horse, and they want to go to their traditional territory in Dead Horse and find out what's happening at Dead Horse, so they could hook up. They could hook up on the app. You could take your little one out with Duncan or whomever and go out to your territory or go whatever they're going to do in the bush. So we really want to take a look at that app because physical relationships are important to nation building. So we want to continue to encourage the connection between youth, elders. Go ahead, hit me. See, ignores me. See? So that's what our Meetup app is. So we're not going to spend too much time on that. I'll give you a sense of what the purpose of that is, but it's to push human connection. Okay, STEM. I'm going to give this to Duncan for a little bit because it was this crazy guy who thought about this crazy idea. So I'm going to give him the mic. And why STEM?
Yeah, in regards to the science part of it, the school, the elementary school is already doing that. We'll just enhance that a bit. Same with the mathematics. They're already doing that. We'll enhance the mathematics a bit to get them to a point where they have the capability to work within the whole idea of computer science. Whole idea of technology, and the world is moving fast in regards to technology. I always like to give an example of my tablet, my phone. Everybody's got these things now. When I was a teenager, these things didn't exist. When I was a teenager, we had party lines. And in my lifetime, we've gone so fast. And how many people in this room, besides Sharon's guy there, actually knows how these things work? How many people in this room know how this thing works? There's a computer in here, and there's 2 radios in here. Wi-Fi is a radio. Bluetooth is a radio. So, and there's also coding. The program that runs this thing runs on codes. That guy over there knows that. I have a real interest in this stuff because that's the way the world is going. You know, we talk about computers and classical computers and where things are going. Right now, they have what's called quantum computers, which run thousands of times faster than a classical computer. And in 10, 15 years' time, those quantum computers will probably be running cities. When you look at smart cities, they'll probably be those quantum computers. And I don't want to get into the whole issue in regards to quantum mechanics and physics and electrons and protons and nucleus, because that's the basic thing that quantum computers run on. So the main focus, I guess, is that we want to get our kids up to a level where they're able to compete, because there's no curriculum in Ontario in regards to this. There's schools that do it, but schools do it on their own. There's teachers that do it, but teachers do it on their own. There's no curriculum. There's no curriculum at the elementary school level. There's no curriculum at the high school level. It's all ad hoc. That's why Canada and the United States are so far behind India and China. So, technology. How do we use technology to make our communities, and our community in particular, a lot better place to live? How do we use technology to have our kids have an upper hand when they get to high school and when they get to college and when they get to university? because Ontario don't teach it, but we will. And I think that's why Infrastructure Canada is going in this direction, because they want ideas, because the schools aren't doing it. There's a little bit in BC, I believe. BC has some STEM curriculum. The same thing with engineering, the whole idea of engineering. And I went, I think Amy did also, I went online to find out at what grade level kids learn about an atom and the nucleus and what makes up the components of an atom and electrons that flow around that haphazardly around that atom. Because those electrons basically is what make this thing work. So the whole idea about engineering and where do we go with engineering? So we need to get our kids to think like that. There's small little kits you can buy for middle grade school kids, elementary school kids, to start teaching them electricity, to start teaching them about circuits, to start teaching them about atoms and the flow of electrons. We can do that. That's not hard. And we need to do it, because if we don't, our kids are going to get left behind. The Chinese and the Asians are going to do it for us. You always read, and the Russians, you always read about how they're hacking our computers all the time. Well, that's why, because they're experts at that. They have their kids doing it. I had my grandson, Lex. I look at him like a son because he's always with me. I took him to a robotics course in Toronto this summer. They're little 1-week courses. And the majority of those kids that were in that course were Asian kids. So, in all of those courses. And when I heard their parents talking to the course instructors, they were talking about this course and that course and this course and that course. And what those Asian parents were doing was putting their kids in those courses the whole entire summer. So every week they were there at that course learning something in regards to this. So we need to go in that direction, and hopefully, and I think we stand a good chance to really tell you the truth. We've got good people working on this thing. And we've got smart teachers in Meektiga, and they're going to do a little presentation here for you. And we're trying to solicit the help of a lot of experts to put this whole package together. So come beginning of March, we'll have an outline of where we want to go with this. So with that, and we need your help too. We need your help and your support in trying to put this all together, because it's your kids eventually, even if it's off reserve. This is going to be open source. This is going to be online. It has to be replicable. Any community is going to have to be able to copy this. And that's why the government is spending so much money on it. And the other component to this is the language, because the federal government is putting a lot of money into language, First Nation languages. They are actually coming out with legislation by the end of January called the First Nations Language Act. So they're putting a lot of money in it. Anyway, I'll give it back to Joanne.
Thank you, Duncan. Okay, just to recap, Lisa's here, our education director, and we have two of our teachers, Rhonda and Amy. So these women, along with their team, have been doing lots of stuff in our elementary school and our high school. We have some satellite programs here that Rhonda's doing inside of Thunder Bay, her and Amy. So they've been doing a lot of work and also taking a look at this particular proposal and what impacts does it have, what changes do we need to make inside of our school system. So like Duncan said, We already have a math program. We already have a science program. The province has standards and curriculum written up to yin-yang on math and science. So Amy and her team back home are looking at comparing our math and science and doing an analysis of our curriculum of math and science. One of the biggest pieces with this Smart Cities proposal is that because it's a technology proposal, we need to take a look at technology. So we're looking at some online education. Online education may not seem new to you, but a lot of you have probably done some version of online. But what's happening with the online world is there's a big shift in happening with that. Because we did some work and we took a look at what does online or a hybrid model of online success looks like. 85% failure rate. This is from Harvard and MIT, so these are real research institutions. So we told ourselves, how could we go and develop a program when we already know that there's an 85% failure rate? That doesn't sound like a smart thing to do. So we went back and did research, and we went and found different models that exist in the world that teach differently. It's a different type of philosophy and how education is being looked at in today's world. So with that piece, our school staff has taken a look at how do we change our philosophy, how do we accommodate our philosophy to allow us to be wonderful and great and successful in this new world. But in addition to that, how do we change our philosophy to ensure our Anishinaabe worldview, our Anishinaabe ways and philosophy are not lost? So these women are looking at how do we merge both those worlds, because we can't pick one and let the other leave. So we've been doing lots of work in land-based learning, looking at cultural stuff inside of our schools and inside of our education system. So this philosophy and methodology is important because we cannot implement something that is going to fail without changing on how we deliver it. So that's a big piece that's happening, that exists. Okay, Duncan talked about technology. Inside of our elementary school, and you may not think this is important to you because you're not living on the reserve, but like Duncan said, this information is going to be available online. So your kids, whether you do them at home or your schools pick up some of this information, it'll be available there. In our elementary school, we have control over education. Whole whack of research to find what is the best fit. So we found code.org. So we're wanting to look at computer science, block-based program, and starting to introduce languages. We don't want our kids to be users of phones. Not good enough for us. Like Duncan said, we want our kids to be able to go inside of those phones, to understand circuits, to understand robotics, to understand the technology that builds those things. We don't want them to be users. That's not good enough. We're going to get left behind if that's all they can do is use those phones. How do they build those devices? That's what we want our kids. So grade 9 and 10, again, we're looking at computer languages. What are those languages those kids need inside of the world of technology? Databases and networks. The second piece to the last piece of STEM is engineering. What we found, we went and took a look at, here's what our kids should know about the engineering world. And then we were all excited. Then Lisa and Amy come to me one day, bust my little bubble, with love they did though. And they came back and said, you better tell Duncan and JP something. And I'm like, what? The Ontario provincial curriculum does not have any courses for what they want to do. And we cannot deliver and we cannot fix this problem because Ontario curriculum standards limit us. So we're like, oh my God, I think they got like 5 courses or something like that in high school. It was really limited. So the schools, the provincial schools are not even teaching technology and engineering. And you saw the stuff in the papers last year about the sex ed curriculum and the Indigenous curriculum. And we saw how that went and how slow that process is. It's a bureaucratic process. So we're like, oh my goodness, what are we going to do? Because what we wanted to do, we can't do because Ontario's put a big X on that. So we've had to go back and take a look at what do we do in the T&E in high school because we can't do it inside of the curriculum. So going back to engineering, so we're going to focus on two pieces of engineering, electrical engineering. So that's the stuff Duncan was talking about, the currents and atoms and protons and electrons and all of those electrical things that make this happen, that make these phones happen. IoT devices, you see those things, Fitbits and all of that stuff, smart fridges, smart microwaves, all of that stuff. That's all IoT. So this electrical engineering component is going to be very heavy, and along with the computer engineering, and this is actually how do you build a computer? How do you build a robot? And so that piece of computer engineering is going to take a look and focus on robotics, is going to focus on building these machines. So if you think about engineering, engineering is those physical things you can touch, the phone, the computer, this, and technology is the stuff that goes inside of the computer that makes it run, that goes inside the smartphones. So we're wanting to bring that all in. And these things aren't only by itself. It's about relationships. We can't have engineering without technology. We can't have technology without math. We can't have math without physics. So it is about the relationship of those four things. So going back to telling you that we cannot implement this inside of our high school, even if it's online, because of Ontario's limitations. So we went back to the drawing board, and what we've come up with now, we haven't done any work in this. We're doing some work next week on it. But we want to bring the T&E into the work environment. We cannot keep it in the school by itself because we can't do it in there. So what we're talking about now is to take a look at how do we build career paths for our children? So how do we take the T&E? So let's say we have this vision, this journey of what T&E looks like. This half is going to go into the elementary school, which is fine, but this other half, we got nothing to do with it. So what we want to do now is we're going to look at some co-op programs. These ladies got all the information how to do that. And we're going to put it inside of our economic development department in the community. So what we'll do now is to start looking at co-ops, and this will be open to all of our community members, but looking at co-ops. So Gage wants to do some stuff in electrical engineering or whatever else. So he's going to come, let's say we got a robotics course, and we know you can't get a credit for that, so we're going to try and make it into a co-op. So you'll be able to come, get the engineering stuff on robotics, but we'll give you real work experience. So we'll start you off in the community, let's say a summer job, whatever that thing is. So you're going to come and learn about robotics, but your work experience is going to maybe build a computer for the health center. That would be your first thing. The second year, you're going to do another course, and what we're trying to do, what Duncan said, is we're hooking up with engineering firms, technology firms. So ultimately, your work experience hopefully will be with an engineering firm. So you'll get some co-op credits, but you're going to get real live experience because it needs to be hand-on. You need to build a computer. You need to build a robot. You need to do the stuff. So how do we make that inside of a work and set a path? So maybe it's a 5-year path. You know, you're going to do this, and maybe you end up at Google for an internship, or Apple, or... So that's kind of what we're trying to do. We'll be working on that. We got some people coming on board that's going to take this and fly with it. So we're working on this next week, running out the details on that. So that's kind of a very quick summary of the Smart Cities proposal. So 3 things. I'm going to talk about language after this. 3 things: language, STEM, meetup app, 3 parts of that. So with that, Lisa's going to come and chit-chat about it. One of the biggest pieces I want you to remember is that all of this stuff has to sit on something. And it's going to sit on an online platform, and it's called Beat2Go X. And this is a really big part for our community because it's not, Beat2Go X is not only a smart cities initiative, it is the beginning of our virtual community. So Beat2Go X should be of interest to you, and we're going to have some conversations because it's how do we build a stronger community using technology. So keep your mind, Beat2Go X, we're going to do some exercises after. 2 questions. What should every member of Beat2Go First Nation know? What information, whether you live in Thunder Bay, Toronto, in the community, what information should you be given to be part of the community, to be well informed, to be empowered? So that's one question for Beat2Go X, because that's what Beat2Go X, we're going to build this virtual res. So that's what Beat2Go X will do. So what information should you know as a band member? Question 1. And question number 2, what is your responsibility, what is my responsibility as a Beat2Go member to make our community strong? So those will be 2 questions that you could think about throughout the next little while. We'll stick them on there. So what information should you know, and what should you, me, you contribute? Okay, so with that, we're going to get Lisa. Okay, first question is, what information should you as a band member know about your community? So Beat2Go X is going to be out in the world. As a band member, you're going to come and hit a button. What information would you like to see on Beat2Go X about your community? So that's the first question. And the second question, as a band member, what is it you should be doing to contribute to making our community good and wonderful? So 2 questions. All right, I give you our wonderful education staff, and here you go, girls.
So my portion of this is very short in regards to Amy's portion. I just wanted to basically take you a little bit back in time in order to see where we've come from and where we're heading. A few slides for sure, very limited stuff, but I want to first acknowledge some of the people back home who have influenced the education program in our community, our education department greatly, and it goes without saying that we wouldn't be as progressive as we are without some of these people. And some of them were knowledge keepers who did input into the curriculum or have left us some valuable teachings, who have sat on committees, who have given input, not just for issues directly in our community, but for issues affecting post-secondary students, because those affect you also. So these are some of the people who've sat there and helped us develop policy and have implemented things. So just very briefly, again, if you go back to the 1970s, when it was the old Indian Affairs control over the systems, the decision came from our leadership at the time that we would administer and operate our own elementary school, and then the creation of a daycare program. In 1983, that's how old our building is right now. The section going towards to the left is 83. The original section, the peak that's on my right, that's from a 1954 foundation. So it's very old, it's very dated. But nonetheless, we are still in it, we are still making it function. We have 2 portables in there on the sides that you can't see. So We still don't have a gym. We use the community hall as a gym. So when the control over education came, that's when our actual teachers began to be hired. And if you know Shirley Michano, she's still there. She's one of our longest employed teachers there. She remembers receiving her paychecks through the Department of Indian Affairs through the mail. So it's come a long way in a short time. Also in the 90s, Pick River Private High School began. And that began through the direction and development also through Cindy Fisher. So what that actually means is that we are able to grant Ontario secondary school diplomas and credits. There was also other sites that opened under our name. Long Lac had a site, Aralan had a site, Mobert had a site, Ganoogaming had a site. So that was open to anyone, it was a lot of adults, but mostly anyone who did not have a completed OSSD that wanted to complete it in their own community. The mid to late 1990s, the new daycare facility was built. Head Start program was introduced in the community, and then they later combined into a new facility. Plans began on language revitalization and the inclusion of more Anishinaabeg history and curriculum content. The high school sites closed in the smaller communities, like the distance communities, with the exception of the Pick River Private High School at home, we remained open. During that time, there was policy that in order to be successful in getting a position with the First Nation, there was a grade 12 policy. Lots and lots of graduates happened. In fact, our numbers started dwindling because there was less and less need for that service because everybody was getting their grade 12. So the high school site did dwindle. However, in 2010, we did education was included under a major umbrella. This included the daycare, the elementary school, the high school. We still have high school students going into the secondary school in Marathon and also the post-secondary program. And then 2013, we actually started work to develop our own curriculum for the elementary school, mostly the secondary subjects. And when I say the secondary subjects, we're talking about the sciences, the social studies, all of that stuff. We kind of left the math and the language arts program as is because we know that our kids have to transition into the Ontario system. But it included more locally developed content. We had various sessions where we actually asked parents, what is it that you want your children to learn in our schools? And from there, we developed that. We're finalizing the work, and it'll be ready in the new year. And it's been a long time coming, but a lot of it has the inclusion of our worldview and our philosophy as Anishinaabeg people. There was also more locally developed courses offered by the private high school. When you operate as a private high school, you do still have the confines of the Ontario curriculum because you're basically handing out Ontario credits, you're handing out Ontario diplomas, so we have to also abide by some of their guidelines and rules. However, there is some flexibility. Not recently, but we have created our own Ojibwe course. Right now, there's a couple of students taking the Aboriginal governance course. You might have seen a couple of the young people traveling with Duncan. We've turned that into a course so they get a credit after completing that work. And we also have the interdisciplinary studies course. That's the course where our students were able to engage in things that were more land-based. They went ice fishing, they went hunting, they built the birch bark canoe. In fact, we got to go home tomorrow and be home by 1 o'clock because tomorrow they are lacing snowshoes with Dan and Eva Cucci as part of a course. So those courses exist within our program and we've been able to make them work. 2017, we signed on to the Anishinaabeg Education System, which was a self-governing agreement. Really meant a little more flexibility, less reporting, slight increase in funding, but not a whole lot. There is more coordination and capacity development within our region with the other First Nations that have signed on. 2017 also, we opened up a high school site. I don't know how many of you know that it's us that are, with AETS, who have an office on Waverly Library. That's where Rhonda LeClaire is our teacher. She's working out of that office. We are granting Ontario Secondary School credits through Pick River Private High School. So that partnership began in 2017. We actually just had a graduation today with 5 graduates. And then, yeah, so we're finalizing our framework and our local curriculum. Future development, we have tried very hard because of our school being outdated to push for a new school, and we're happy to announce that this is something that is going to be occurring. We are embedding more of the history, language, and land opportunities in the curriculum, and then the STEM emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and math. And obviously this pulls us into the Smart City Challenge. One of the things that I toyed around with also personally, as someone who's been in education for almost 20 years, is that how do we combine something like our students going out wild rice picking, understanding the significance of that rice, of the water, of the ceremony that goes into that. How do we combine that with the world that's changing today? And that's our challenge, really. How do we do that? How do we combine those things and still hang on to our identity and our worldview and our philosophies? And obviously, everything is going to be available online, those things that we develop. Some of the opportunities obviously are embedded in our elementary school and our high schools, but indeed there is opportunity. I'm going to hand it over to Amy because for this project, she dove in a little bit deeper in the technology and engineering, well, mostly technology, and comparing what's out there. As Duncan has indicated before, we looked at Ontario curriculum. Right now, there's only 2 provinces across Canada who are doing a lot of the STEM stuff. So if you have children right now attending Ontario provincial schools and you say, oh yeah, they built a robot, or they built this, or they did that, a lot of it will be a day thing or a camp they did. It's temporary. It's not mandated in their curriculum. They don't have to do it. 2 provinces, like I said, Alberta, Nova Scotia, they mandated it in our curriculum. That's how far other provinces are behind. In fact, I just got an email about a month ago saying that they are now opening up sessions for engagement to engage parents on STEM curriculum. So it's going to take a while for them to develop it, but we don't want to wait. We want to bring this as part of our school systems and part of our education as quickly as possible. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy right now, and she'll expand on that. Thanks.
So one of the big issues with STEM, and you kind of like science, technology, engineering, and math, those are terms that are not necessarily new to anybody, right? We all kind of have been through the science, the technology. We know what tech is. We've heard of engineering. We've been through math programs. These are not new terms. So why is Ontario so behind? And that was one of the big issues and what we kind of researched and going through. And it's money. Essentially, the Ontario government does not want to put more money into training their teachers with that kind of stuff, right? It costs boards money to retrain teachers in all of these different things. Now, the big question here was, how are we going to do it? We come from an area where these things are really, really important to us. The land-based stuff was super, super important. It's close to our heart, right? And how do we, like, what does the model of technology look like, and how does it relate to that land-based stuff? I know a lot of people think that online education is sticking your child in front of a computer and they're watching YouTube, or they're watching somebody speak, and they're not really engaged in anything. We've seen all the little zombies on the iPads, and how zoned in they are to the TVs and the Baby Shark song. That's not what we're doing here, right? We needed to see how that online education was going to benefit our students and how we can change it. How can we break that mold? So like we said, we dove into this head first. I'm going to show you a video in a little bit in regards to how we are going to kind of implement those two things. We went through a class who did an electrical engineering unit. So these are grades 7 and 8s who literally started from, like Duncan said, the atoms, the molecules, the currents, the everything. And in terms that, how can they take that and how can they apply it to real world situations? Now, you might not think about it in that sense. They did end up, their final project was that they had to be able to create fire. We're not just out there talking about building a bunch of little firebugs. No. How can they go into the woods and survive based on the knowledge that they have, based on what they know about currents and volts and atoms and molecules? And they took this and they ran with it because of the way that we changed the model. Now, the engineering portion, the technology portion, as we kind of mentioned earlier, that doesn't exist in a lot of the elementary school. And quite frankly, it only really kind of exists in a portion of the secondary school. The last update for technology in the Ontario secondary school curriculum was in 2008. 2008. Can you remember the cell phone that you had in 2008? I'm pretty sure people were still rocking the Blackberries. I think it was like an iPhone 2 or something like that is what the current iPhone was back then. Technology changes. We know that. Every single year, Apple comes out with a brand new cell phone that does everything. They recognize your facial expressions. It recognizes the things that you say in conversation, and then it brings it up on your Facebook news feed after. Those things are darn smart. But back in 2008, can you imagine the technology then compared to now? That is what the Ontario schools are teaching your students if they get that secondary subject. That is not a compulsory course. That is something that your student can take if available. Technically, right now, in the smaller schools, stuff like that gets pushed aside. They have tons and tons of trades courses because that's something that, you know, our area needs. Mining courses, welding courses, and all valid things, for sure. But the way that the world is moving, and we say that time and time again, is that we need people to fill those jobs. There's money in those positions. So, and it's kind of funny because we work with ITCT, or that's what it's called, ICTC, yes. So it's the Information Communication Technology Council of Canada. And what they do is they kind of take a lot of the different statistics and everything. Less than 2% of the jobs that are being filled are Aboriginal people. And even further to that, a lot of them are through males, Aboriginal males. So why aren't our girls in those capacities, right? So how did, and here was the question was, how do we get our girls involved as well, right? Equal playing fields, yes, of course, we're all here for the equal playing field, and a lot of the times we see these little ones, yeah, they are competitive in that sense. So what's happening at the end of either elementary school or secondary school that's showing our girls that they can't go into those fields? What's happening there? There's money for them to go into those fields, but they're just not going in there. We need to lay a stronger foundation somehow, and this is how we're going to do it. So I'm going to show you a quick video, like I said, in regards to the electrical engineering that we kind of did. This was a pilot project. Betagon X, like we said, open source. What does that mean? And what does that mean for everybody in this room? Or all of the community members, not just on reserve? But that replicatable portion of that means that everything that we're doing is going to be online, open source, so that no matter if your child goes to school here in Thunder Bay or Toronto or somewhere in the Yukon, their teacher could access this information and do it. We have real-world teachers working on this, talking about, okay, well, what worked, what didn't work, and how can we make it better for our kids? And not just our kids either, for all of the kids in Canada, throughout the world. So that's really, really big. And we've been very meticulous about a lot of the research that we're looking at and how can we make it through that real world sense. We have teachers who are going through these units. They're saying, okay, well, maybe this worked, and what could we change for this for next time? And you'll see in this video that we harness that component of the land-based education to go along with those atoms and those molecules and those currents and those volts. And we made it so that those kids can understand it in something that they can apply with their hands. The beginning of this is will be a story told by a young girl in the school in regards to one of our creation stories, one of how the First Nation people received fire. So that was a component of the unit. And then the kids worked through, I think, 5 or 6 different lessons in regards to, they worked all the way up to that final project of how can they take a non-traditional fire source and make fire. And in this case, they used batteries, they used friction, they used currents, and they used volts.
When Nanabush was still young, he said to his grandmother, Nokomis, "Grandmother, we have no fire, and it's cold in here. Let me go get some fire." Nokomis tried to make him forget the idea of getting fire because it was dangerous, but Nanabush insisted. Nanabush knew he had a long journey ahead, so he made a canoe of bark. He took on the shape of a rabbit so he wouldn't be recognized and started east across the large body of water. He knew that there was an old man living on an island who had fire. As Nanabush, in the form of a rabbit, approached the island, it was still dark, and he pulled his canoe ashore and hopped along until he came to the wigwam of the old man. The old man had 2 daughters who came out of the wigwam and saw the little rabbit all wet and cold. They picked him up and took him inside, setting him down next to the fire to get warm. The girls went about their evening duties while the rabbit sat by the fire. He hopped a little nearer to the fire to try to pick up a coal, but as he moved, the earth shook and disturbed the old man, who was napping in the wigwam. "What was that?" the old man. The daughter said it was nothing, and told him they were only trying to warm up the poor little rabbit they had found. When the girls went back to their work, Rabbit grabbed a burning stick and ran out of the wigwam, going as fast as he could back to the place where he had left his canoe. The girls and the old man dashed out of the wigwam, chasing the rabbit who had stolen the fire. The rabbit reached his canoe safely and pushed off into the water, leaving the old man and his daughters on shore. He paddled as fast as he could toward his grandmother's home. The air rushing past the canoe made the stick burn fiercely, and by the time he reached home, Nokomis could see that his fur was badly burned in several places. He took the burning stick from him and made a fire, and then dressed his wounds so his fur would grow back.
One of the biggest issues with innovation among the teaching world is that the professional development cannot keep up with how quickly technology changes. The industry demand for bigger and brighter technical skills has a strain on the financial burden of schools and boards to properly train their teachers to teach these new skills, sometimes not ever having been trained in them themselves. One of the many benefits of online education is that it allows the students to directly connect with professionals in the industry. Teachers become the facilitator, working and learning beside the student. In all cultures, fire and heat are some of the most basic elements of need. However, from the Anishinaabe perspective, fire was a gift given to us from the Creator. It not only gives us a basic need to survive, but also provides us with a direct link to the spirit world and our ancestors, to which we offer prayers and tobacco to. With STEM education and hands-on learning, we're giving the students the chance to put theories to the test. Students in the electrical engineering pilot project were able to learn the basics of electrical engineering and core science expectations while learning how to directly apply these concepts to real-world situations. With Betagon X, our goal is to bridge the concepts of the latest industry standards and needs and maintain our students' sense of identity and culture by applying these standards to land-based education and skills.
So just as a note to that, the grade 7 and 8 teacher does not have an electrical engineering degree. So the problem is, like, how do we necessarily, if these are the concepts that we want to teach our kids, how do we get the professionals in there who are qualified for those kind of topics that will teach our kids these? And that's where the online component comes in. The teacher becomes the facilitator in this question. They will implement the online learning and learn alongside the student, and then work as project-based. So everything is all hands-on and in real-world concepts. So if we were going to be doing this, the question is, well, do we have to have all scientists? Do we have to have all techie gurus? Do we have to have all engineers or mathematicians in there? No, we don't. It's not, especially not at the elementary level. But this is how it's going to change. And this is how it's going to change for not just our kids in Beatsagon, but our kids across Canada.
We've been working on language reconstruction in our community for a few years now. And when smart cities came available, we decided that we have an avenue where we can do some work with our language. What you see here, the three people on top, Cecil Twantz, Myra Michano, and Art Fisher. These three individuals worked very, very hard over a 4-year program to start looking at documentation of our language. In order to do language reconstruction was really hard because we had to admit in our community, and it was very hard to admit that our language is dead. And sit with that for a while and let me know how that feels inside of your hearts to know Biktagong Nishnabe Win is dead. Think about when these little young ones are around playing in the baseball field or the hockey arena. Do they even hear the language anymore? Like, we heard the language growing up a little bit. We still don't understand it. But to sit there and think about, all the time, Gage, is Gage's babies going to speak that language or even hear that language? So it was really hard to say our language is dead. So Myra and a few elders wanted us to work on Biktagong dialect. We didn't even know what that was. There was nothing documented. We had a couple of high proficiency speakers, Myra and Pradi, and then we had people like my mom and Thelma who understood everything. They could have a little bit conversation, but they can't speak like we're speaking in English. So basically, language in our community was dead. So these three individuals, along with JP Montano, who's been working in our community on language reconstruction, and a whole whack of other people, we went through exercises to reconstruct the dialect. So a couple things happened. We picked a standard orthography, a standard writing system, in order for these young kids to be able to do something with language. Computers, they need consistency. So there was already a writing system developed for Anishinaabe language, and also it's the same writing system in Finland, apparently, double vowel. So that was the first thing we do. We selected a standard orthography. Then from there, we went into verb charts. We're very proud to say that we believe we're the only community who has full verb conjugation charts. That's very big and gigantic. In addition to that, we've been able to do full vowel Ojibwe and Potawatomi, Odawa verb charts because we had the grammar bridge. So Anishinaabe is a whole range of dialects. So if you go out west, the western part of here, it's full vowel. Vowel, consonant, that's the rules. So you hear Anishinaabe, you see that? Anishinaabe, it spells with the big A. That's very western. That's Dave Kershane, Elmer, Fred Kelly, the people living in the west down in Minnesota, that they're full vowel. If you take Anishinaabe country and you spread that whole thing over rainbow and you take it over to Manitoulin Island, it's Odawa, and it's dropped Anishinaabe. So they don't, some of the communities do because it is. But in our community, we're not full vowel, and we're not quite drop vowel. We're in the middle. So if you hear regular people talk, if you in regular discourse, you don't hear our elders going, "Oh, I'm an Anishinaabe." You never hear that. Talk to Myra or any of those people. We're Anishinaabe. So you hear the difference. Anishinaabe, Anishinaabe. So we went through that piece. We got full verb charts. We got noun declension charts. We have a dictionary. We have standardized orthography. In addition to that, We have a database. So we have this beautiful database, and we have all the dictionaries, all the stuff that is open source out in the world sitting in one little piece of information. We got tons and tons of information. One of the biggest piece of this reconstruction work is that it was very healing, because we had to go back to these individuals who went through residential schools. I'll use Nancy for example. Her grandchildren and her children, like many of us, were very upset with their mother because why did you not give us our language? Why? And we all know what that looks like. And Nancy's sitting there with guilt, shame, boo-boos because of her history, but because she didn't transfer any of this language to her children. So when we went to work on language reconstruction, we had to go with open hearts because people were hurt. So this language reconstruction work allowed a space for community healing with regards to language, residential school, and all that to happen. So having all this stuff, you don't create speakers. You do not create speakers using grammar. So it's good to do that, to document the language, but we're not going to create speakers. We're going to focus on immersion. Right now, everyone's talking immersion. Way back when we started this, nobody was talking immersion. Immersion was old. People were fighting us all over the place because it's a grammar-based industry. So what immersion is, so if we were in the room and you were speaking the language, the two of you, and you're just standing there and you didn't speak no English, we're sitting here listening to you, there's no English in the room, that is not immersion. It is not immersion. If Beatrice and Jerry were talking the language, we're sitting here, we ain't gonna understand anything they say. No matter how much they're talking, if they're just sitting there talking. We could sit here for 10 hours and listen to them talk back and forth. That is not immersion. Immersion is about focusing on the transfer of meaning. There's research, there's a science, there's a way language is acquired. So if we take a look on, you're not sitting there focusing on words and memory. That is not immersion. Immersion is about acquisition of language. And if we take a look at our brain functions, our brain has functions for everything. Our brain has a piece for memory and a piece for acquisition. So inside of acquisition comes immersion and transferring meaning. So I'm going to go right to that. 2,000 hours is what we're doing. 2,000 hours is really important. Think about this young baby. Are they sitting there with a book? Sitting there saying, look, green, green, R-G-R-E-E-N. Say it, say it, say it. Is that what they do? No. What they do is they talk to their baby, they provide meaning, they provide context. You want a drink? Let's put on your hat. So they're showing meaning, and that baby listens for almost 2,000 hours before they become speakers. Think about that little baby's not going to start speaking for about 2 years yet. Might say an odd word here and there, but during that time, they're listening to these parents, these grandparents, the people around them, and they're doing immersion for them all the time. And once they understand, now they don't need all of this, and their lad just has to be filled up with language. So our Smart Cities is going to give 2,000 hours online. All you have to do at home is hit play. Sit there and listen. 2,000 hours, you will become an understander of Anishinaabe. We're not just picking this out of the world. We've gone to the Maoris, we've gone to Hawaiians, we've gone to French Canada. We've took a look at successful models. So Wawa immersion, we don't have fluent speakers to do this. So we're like, what does that mean? We don't do nothing? Because Myra can't sit there and do 2,000 hours of this. If she was younger, she would. Right now, she can't. So we had to come up with something new for this. So we've got Wawa immersion. So basically what they're going to do is I'm going to show it to you very quickly. We have Esther Michano and Debbie Crossan, who've been working on Wawa immersion. And if any of you know those ladies, they're kind of crazy. So those make good immersion instructors. Someone like me, I ain't no good immersion instructor. But these women are animated, they're creative, they're funny, they're engaging, and these are the perfect girls for Wawa immersion instruction. And Martina Moses, I hope you're watching this. Instead of cleaning up. So we're going to do 2,000 hours. JP Montano, who became a speaker, he was adopted out into New York City. He didn't hear anything. He didn't even know he was Indian. Not only did they adopt him out, they erased his birth certificate and took Native American and put white on there. So we have someone from New York City, raised in New York City, didn't find out he was Anishinaabe till 25, and basically went to Barb Nolan, who's the first speaker. He taught her how to make him a speaker. So she took his methods, which are French immersion, Maori, Hawaiian, and became a speaker utilizing that method. So it's that same method we're going to use because it worked in Maori country, Hawaiian country, French Canada country. Plus we saw an individual go from understanding nothing to speaking Odawa, and now grammar bridge into Anishinaabe. So it works. So we got 2,000 hours. JP tells us, I acquired my language in the ladies' department store in Walmart. So he's got 2,000 of hours inside of Walmart with immersion. Doesn't matter, he became a speaker. We had a question, if we're going to give 2,000 hours, what should the content be? Should it be, here's the green bloomers, purple bloomers, whatever? No, we want to look at content. Going back to, Lisa, Amy talking about identity. We've gone to our Otso Kanan and our sacred stories. Again, we're very fortunate because we have some information from 1950s that were written down. We have Clara Moses, Rocco, Camille, Matilda, leaving us part of stories. Louis Goodchild in his memoirs from 1958, he says, we have a way. And Louis, through his memoirs, isn't really pushy. I don't know what the word is, but when he talks about Otso Kanan, he's really pushy and he's really direct. And so he says that we, Bitagong Anishinaabe, have a way, and our Otso Kanan tells us what that way is. So sit with that an elder back from the 1950s, 1930s is saying that. When we started this out in 2015, Pradi was part of this reconstruction group, and he comes to the meeting, and Pradi being Pradi, Nana Bojo doesn't exist. You're Nana Bojo, you're Nana Bojo, you're Nana Bojo, you're Nana Bojo. So it says to sit there and to take one of our most sacred characters, Nana Bojo, and Pradi to say, Nicole, you're Nana Bojo. Like, just sit with that again. So for us generation, when we have those elders, and those are not young elders like him, they're old elders. So if they're telling us that our Otso Kanan is the way and we're Nana Bojo, there's something inside of there. So we're going inside of our Otso Kanan. We have some stuff. And if you go on the internet, you see legends and myths all over the place. We're not doing that. We're not going to go and pick. We've done the research. Again, we got a database. All Algonquin Otso Kanan we have sitting in our database. Not good enough. How do we know it's Bitagong? So we do have some stuff. So what we're doing is we're going through the Otso Kanan that was left for us. And here's an example of what we'll do. We know the Otso Kanan that was left, that they speak about 4 brothers. Nana Bojo has 3 brothers, so there's 4 of them. We know that to be true because Clara and Rocco and our elders have told us that. So when we go to do our research, We're going to throw those stories away that talk about two brothers. We're only going to pull the four brothers in. So that's an example. One of the creation stories, we all hear various versions. I have never heard the version when the muskrat goes down to get the land. You know, he swims up. I have never heard that the lowering of a braid, that Nana Bojo lowered a braid so that muskrat could go down. And you know where we heard that from? We have it on audio and video. Alphonse Moses talks about Nana Bojo lowering his braid. Are you going to see that on the internet in a lot of stories? Maybe not. I haven't come across it. But if Rocco is telling us that Nana Bojo put that braid down, then that's part of our story. It's, you know, so we can't toss those. So that's what we're doing. We're laying some foundations, some test marks, and then we're going to pull in what we can pull in to fill this whole business about our sacred stories. And we're going to do immersion in the language on our sacred stories because Louis says we have a way. Louis wanted to leave all of that Atsokanen in the Giselle LeCour interviews. She wouldn't let him. She says, I just want regular stories. Like imagine Louis would have left us our whole Atsokanen. But he's got it spread out all through those documents. It's beautiful. So that's what our stories are going to be about. Okay, Beak the Gong X is going to hold those. Okay, I want to show you one really good thing and then we'll be done. This will be worth it. I just got to wait for my old 50-year-old computer. Okay, this is Wawa immersion. What we've done is we've taken Esther and Debbie, who are natural actresses. They've done the acting. JP has gone through becoming a speaker of Odawa, plus working with our speakers for the last 10 years. Plus now he has verb charts, noun charts, and a dictionary to grammar bridge. So he's taken our language, he's overdubbed it onto these videos, and this is an example of the 2,000 hours that will be put on Beak the Gong X for you to watch at home in your PJs.
Wingego gjate nongom. Wingego wasea. Mabmenago ke pichu waseamagak. Aquasage wegizis. Migo geget gjaseget wegizis. Niben go geget. Aquasage wegizis. Niben go geget. No magedon, no wenon, wabuganin. Washmedash jiamagat nibing. Pijamandaman no wenon. Geget sagok chigajate. Mishandum we dekagmik be, we zigen amadaziad, we nekwayan. Dum noagamin geget wen be. Wien gego noagamin. Niben go geget. Wien gego jas ge nongom. Geget mi do kagon, we dekagmikten be washme uidekizjan. Gabish wien go wien geten gejes. Neapen giso skis go kanen, gebis kanen. Nikang gejo bitis. When biskogen tam gegiskan. Midas washme wewendam jikskitoyan. Wien wendeman wien basen dekean. Ntam, nmanjene kaning. Midas kitchene kaning, jejo bides yan. Midas den gwaning, mino dam kanang. Kashko sektash, gejo bides nmastang. Mino en kading. Jakot Minua wasea. Lieben go geget. Nogis got de pichum jakok nongum. Giabe bongi de kagamek nbe ngam na quen. Kawin gunige basic an kot test non gijago. Mage basic mawin temagodok guje. Minua mawin ge we gumionadok.
Did we understood what was happening? Did you know the story? So you had an idea of what was happening. We don't understand the language, but she's given meaning to the story. And what happens is that meaning goes into your language acquisition device that sits inside your brain. So if you want to know about language acquisition, go read Noam Chomsky, and he's going to tell you how first language comes into your brain. So memory, green, 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 red, red, goes into a memory part of our brain. 18 months that sits in there if we don't use it. So think about things you memorize for tests. Or even think about, well, Russell, when we went to school, Charlie Twance was our language teacher. You said Lambert. You know, we've all had our language teachers in school. We learned 12 days of the year, 12 months, weather. Can you tell me how to say July? Can you tell me how to say November? You went 8 years learning how to say November. But that goes into memory, our memory brain. That is not how we acquire in a language. We want it to go into our language acquisition part of our brain. That's what this does. So there is a science behind that. Show you one more.
Hoa, gawin kshan sidwanak sanon mande. Nashke picha spakwa, gigjigen kinnegegon. Kinnak shugegon. Nashke picha spashksiogak. Noen on ge. Gigen begin mande kinnegegon. Kinnegeg. Aha. Anin is webziad. Wege de gwen. Oh. Oganen. Ho wa. Do we meet you to this? Miksha. Ande tech. Nu imagine this on the tech museum. Nu imagine this. The be eduk. Where de. Geg pigo. We weep. Ajen mo stone the sky. Ho wa. We weep. Gego imagine it zo ked. Ne bind again. Bakakun on wish kwan dem. Be bind again. Meanwhile mother bin. Wish kwan dem go back a bedon. Ah, que gago imagine this. Ah, mi suwe wendum bugadi an mina. Abdek tash, nui gezien de meel, mbe, gezien de megen te, andum gedappen an, we wendum we gezien de mee an. We wendum dash go gezien de meel, we gezie bedie swan. Oh, Migomnik, wina giwab mik michinidzi an gera, bigish na giwab migo swan. How? Wash men minuya.
So those were the first two pieces of Wawa immersion. We, 2 weeks ago, I think, we pushed it out and showed it into the community. But that's what immersion looks like. JP's got his voice over there. We'll be using technology to change it to a woman's voice and all of that stuff and adding. But this is Wawa immersion. The content will be Atsukanen. We're working with a couple of our teaching staff who are teachers, and they're going to look at immersion, what do you call that, with the content, looking at the curriculum content and how does that sit back and forth. So if we do something like, for example, Amy said, Atsukanen on how do we make fire, and then we're training some of our teaching staff inside of the classroom to support that with circuits and whatever else kind of stuff. So I know it's really late. I'd like to thank you for coming out. It was a lot of information in a really short time. We went through it very quickly. We're open to comments, questions, or anything like that afterwards. We have some draws here that we'd like to do.